My mother always said that a family's reputation was like a crystal vase. Once cracked, it could never be made whole again. For 20 years, I believed I was the crack. The night of my parents' 40th wedding anniversary, I stood in a hotel hallway with one hand resting against the bag that held a folder I had kept for 20 years. Beside me, my 19-year-old daughter adjusted the strap of her dress, a nervous habit she's had since she was small. Behind us, Dr. Eleanor Vance waited with the patient stillness of someone who had once found me bleeding on a rain-slicked road and had never quite stopped watching to make sure I was still standing. Through the closed ballroom doors, I could hear my father's voice. "And now," he was saying, his tone warm and practiced, the voice of a man accustomed to being listened to, "the moment we've all been waiting for. For too many years, our family has been incomplete, but tonight, that ends. Please welcome our eldest daughter, Catherine, and our grandson, whom we have waited far too long to meet." Applause swelled behind the doors. I heard the scrape of chairs as people turned toward the entrance. My fingers pressed harder against the bag. I thought of the last time I had stood before a closed door in my parents' house, 15 years old and pregnant, with rain soaking through my clothes and the terrible certainty that no one was coming to open it. "Mom," my daughter said quietly. Her name is Maya. Until 5 days earlier, my parents had never known it. In 19 years, they had never asked. "They really did it. They actually told everyone I'm a boy." "They don't know who you are," I said. "They invented someone easier to love." The applause began to falter, stretching into that awkward silence when an anticipated entrance takes too long. I could picture my mother smoothing her dress, preparing the expression of tearful joy she would show the guests. I could picture my father glancing at the door, irritation beginning to edge out expectation. 20 years ago, they had closed a door and refused to open it. Tonight, I was the one who would decide what happened when it opened again. I reached for the handle. Maya straightened beside me. Eleanor gave a single nod. I pushed the door open and walked into the lie they had built to replace me. The story of how I arrived at that doorway begins, really, 5 days earlier, in the faculty office where I have worked for the past 7 years. I run a support program for students who have aged out of foster care or been estranged from their families. Young people trying to build a future without the safety net that others take for granted. I understand them in ways I wish I didn't have to. I was reviewing a grant proposal when my office phone rang with an internal transfer from the front desk. "Catherine, there's someone here to see you, an older couple. They say they're your parents." I had not spoken to my parents in 20 years. I had not received a phone call, a letter, a birthday card. After the night they put me out, after the hospital and the social worker and the notarized statement in which they rejected any personal relationship with me and refused to recognize my unborn child as part of their family, there had been nothing. I had rebuilt my life from nothing, and I had done it without them. I had assumed I would never see them again. My position was listed on the university website. Finding me would have taken a single search, which meant they could have done it at any point during the previous 20 years. "Send them to the small conference room," I said. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." I used those 10 minutes to steady myself. I closed my office door and sat with my hands flat on my desk and breathed the way Eleanor had taught me during the hardest months of my pregnancy, when panic attacks would seize me without warning, and I would feel again the cold rain and the headlights and the impact that had nearly killed me. I was not 15 anymore. I was 35 years old. I had a career, a home, a daughter who was thriving in her sophomore year of college. My parents had no power over me. But when I walked into the conference room and saw them sitting side by side at the small table, my mother's posture as rigid as ever, my father's hands folded precisely in front of him, I felt my stomach drop the way it used to when I was a child, and knew I had somehow disappointed them before I even understood what I had done wrong. They had aged, of course. My mother's hair was silver now, cut in the same severe style she had always preferred. My father's face had settled into lines of permanent disapproval. They both wore clothes that spoke of quiet money, not flashy, but substantial. The kind of clothes that announce respectability without having to say a word. "Catherine," my mother said, and for a moment her voice almost wavered. "You look well." I didn't sit down. "What do you want?" My father flinched slightly at my directness, but my mother pressed on. She had always been the one who managed difficult conversations, who shaped the family narrative. My father enforced, my mother explained. "We're not here to cause trouble," she said. "We wanted to talk. It's been 20 years. That's a long time to be apart." "You disowned me," I said. "You signed a legal document stating that I was no longer part of your family and that my child would never be considered your grandchild. That wasn't a separation, that was an ending." My father spoke for the first time. "We made mistakes. Both sides made mistakes. We're here because we want to put the past behind us." I noticed the phrasing. Both sides. As if a 15-year-old girl thrown out during a thunderstorm had somehow contributed equally to the decision. As if my contribution had been anything other than existing while pregnant and failing to defend myself against an accusation I didn't even fully understand. "Why now?" I asked. "Why after 20 years? My mother and father exchanged a glance. It was the kind of glance I remembered from childhood. A silent communication that excluded everyone else. A decision being made that I would only learn about after it was already settled. "Our 40th anniversary is next weekend," my mother said. "We're having a celebration, a big one. Friends, colleagues, family. We want you to come. We want to introduce you to everyone. We want to make things right, publicly." 40 years of marriage, I realized, had become an occasion on which they believed a complete family had to be displayed. Somewhere along the way, the appearance of that family had become more important than whether any of us had agreed to participate. Something about the word publicly caught my attention. My mother had never cared about making things right privately. She cared about how things looked. She cared about the crystal vase. "You want me to come to your anniversary party," I said slowly. "And do what exactly? Stand there while you tell everyone how happy you are to be reunited with your long-lost daughter?" "We want to acknowledge you," my father said, "formally, in front of everyone who matters to us." It was so close to what I might have wanted, once. But I had learned to recognize the gap between what my parents said and what they meant. The gap was always where the truth lived. Over the years, they had apparently told the extended family that I wanted no contact, and that reaching out would only drive me farther away. Respecting my supposed wishes had become the excuse everyone used for never checking whether those wishes were real. "And my child?" I asked. "What about your grandchild?" My mother brightened, as if I had finally asked the question she had been waiting for. "We're so glad you brought that up. We want to meet him, of course. For years, whenever people asked, we said you had a son and had chosen to keep him away from us. We told them we were proud of him, even though we hadn't been allowed to be part of his life." The air in the room seemed to change. I felt a cold clarity settle over me, the kind I had learned to recognize in difficult moments. It was the clarity of understanding that something was very wrong. "You've been telling people about your grandson," I repeated. "We had to explain your absence somehow," my mother said, as if this were perfectly reasonable. "People ask questions." "We told them you had chosen to distance yourself, that you had a son, that we hoped one day you would come back to us. It wasn't a lie, exactly. We assumed you'd had the baby. We assumed it was a boy. You assumed, I said. We've built a narrative over the years, my father said, using the word narrative the way someone might say investment portfolio. People know about our grandson. They've asked about him. At the anniversary party, we want to finally introduce him. We want you to come and bring him. We want the family to be whole again. I stared at them. I thought about Maya, who was currently in her dorm room studying for a biology exam, who had grown up knowing exactly why her grandparents were not part of her life, who had once asked me at age 7 if she had done something wrong to make them not want her. I had held her then and told her the truth, that she was the best thing that had ever happened to me, and that anyone who couldn't see that was not worthy of her. I don't have a son, I said. My mother's expression flickered. What? I have a daughter. Her name is Maya. She's 19 years old. She's studying biology. She wants to be a doctor. She's kind and funny and brilliant, and you have never met her because you signed a document stating that she would never be your grandchild. You don't even know her name. The silence that followed was different from the earlier silences. This one was heavy with the weight of something cracking. My mother's carefully composed face showed a flash of something I had never seen before. Not guilt exactly, but a kind of calculation, as if she were rapidly reassembling a puzzle that had just fallen apart. A daughter, she said finally. Well, that's fine. That's wonderful. We can introduce her too. We can just explain that there was a misunderstanding, that we had lost touch and didn't realize. You want to introduce her as what? I asked. The granddaughter you never mentioned? The girl you didn't know existed until 5 minutes ago? Or do you want to pretend she's your grandson for the evening, just to keep the story straight? My father's jaw tightened. There's no need to be hostile. We're trying to fix this. You're not trying to fix anything. You're trying to manage a public relations problem. You told everyone you had a grandson. Now you need a grandson to show them. You don't want me. You don't want my daughter. You want props for your anniversary party. My mother reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine but not quite touching. Catherine, we know we hurt you. We know we made terrible mistakes, but we're your parents. We're asking for a chance to make things right. One evening, that's all we're asking. Come to the party, bring your daughter. Let us introduce you both. After that, we can figure out the rest. We can be a family again. I looked at her outstretched hand and felt nothing. Or rather, I felt something, but it was not the longing I might have expected. It was exhaustion. It was the tired recognition that after 20 years, they still saw me only as a character in their story, someone who existed to serve their needs. You've already told people I'm coming, haven't you? I said. You didn't come here to ask. You came here to inform me of a decision you already made. My mother's hand withdrew. My father looked at the ceiling the way he always had when conversations became uncomfortable. Neither of them denied it. They had not seriously considered that I might refuse. In their minds, being invited back into the family was still something I was supposed to be grateful for. The invitations have already gone out, my mother said. We announced that our eldest daughter and grandson would be attending. People are expecting it. People are excited. If you don't come, it will be a humiliation. For us. For the whole family. What family? I asked. I stopped being part of your family when I was 15 years old. You made sure of that. I turned and walked out of the conference room. I did not look back. But as I walked down the hallway toward my office, my hands were shaking, and I knew that it was not over. It was never going to be over until I decided what kind of ending I wanted to write. Before we continue, if you enjoy having something calming or practical to return to after a story, I've placed a few printable resources in the description below. There's also a special discount code for viewers of this channel. Now, back to Catherine's story. To understand what happened that night at the anniversary party, you have to understand what happened 20 years before. You have to understand the family I grew up in, and the sister who destroyed me, and the particular way that love can be twisted into a weapon when it is given unequally. My sister Claire is 3 years younger than me. From the moment she was born, she was the center of our family, in a way I never was and never would be. I don't say this with self-pity. It's simply the truth. Claire was delicate, where I was sturdy. Emotional, where I was reserved. Demanding, where I was accommodating. My parents adored her for it. They saw her fragility as sensitivity, her demands as spirit. Everything I was, quiet, responsible, self-sufficient, became evidence that I didn't need them as much as she did. The pattern was set early. When Claire took my things, I was expected to share. When Claire broke something and blamed me, I was expected to apologize. When Claire cried, which she did often and easily, I was expected to fix whatever had upset her. "You're the older one," my mother would say. "You're more mature. You need to understand that she's still learning." By the time I was 12, I had learned that my role in the family was to be the easy one, the one who didn't cause problems, the one who absorbed difficulties so that others didn't have to. It was not an assigned role so much as an inherited one, passed down through years of small moments. My mother's sigh of relief when I handled something myself. My father's nod of approval when I didn't make a fuss. Claire's smirk of satisfaction when she got her way yet again. I remember one particular evening when I was 13. Claire had been going through my things and had found my journal. She had read parts of it aloud at dinner, mocking my handwriting, my thoughts, my private feelings. When I grabbed it back from her, she burst into tears and ran to our mother, saying I had hurt her arm. My parents didn't ask to see the journal. They didn't ask what had happened. They simply looked at me with that particular expression of disappointment I had come to know so well. And my mother said, "Catherine, you know your sister is sensitive. You need to be more careful." That was the family I grew up in. That was the system that shaped me. And when I was 15, that system broke me in a way I am still learning to understand. I met Daniel at the beginning of sophomore year. He was new to the school, quiet and serious, with a dry sense of humor that took most people by surprise. We became friends first, study partners in biology class. He was the first person who ever made me feel like my quietness was not a flaw, but simply a way of being. He listened when I talked. He remembered things I told him. He looked at me like I was interesting, like my thoughts mattered. By spring, we were more than friends. We were careful. We were both responsible children of responsible families. But we were also 15, and 15-year-olds make mistakes. Or at least, they make choices whose consequences they cannot fully understand. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. But I also felt something unexpected, a fierce, protective certainty that whatever happened, I would keep this child. I would love this child. I would not let this child feel like a burden. I told Daniel first. He was scared too, but he didn't run. He said we would figure it out together. He said he would be there. He was 15, and he meant it, even though neither of us had any idea what being there would actually require. Then I told my parents. That was when everything began to end. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold, and I told them I was pregnant. I told them I was keeping the baby. I told them I was scared, but I was sure. My mother's first response was not about me. It was about what people would think. "Do you have any idea what this will do to our family?" she asked. "Do you have any idea what people will say?" My father's response was simpler. "You'll terminate," he said. It wasn't a question. "We'll find a clinic. No one has to know." I said no. I said it calmly, but I said it clearly. I was keeping the baby. Whatever happened next, I was keeping the baby. That was the moment my parents stopped seeing me as their daughter and started seeing me as a problem they needed to solve. Not because I had done something wrong, but because my situation threatened the careful image they had built, the respectability, the standing in the community, the crystal vase of our family's reputation. In their eyes, I had become a crack that everyone would see. Claire watched all of this unfold with an intensity I didn't understand at the time. She was 12, on the edge of adolescence, and she had always been jealous of any attention I received, even the negative kind. She wanted to be the center of our family's story. I came to believe later that she resented my friendship with Daniel, that she couldn't stand the fact that he had chosen me. My pregnancy, and everything it represented, seemed to deepen something in her, something that had been there all along, waiting for an opening. She didn't act immediately. She watched first. She paid attention to my phone, to my conversations, to the growing tension in the house. She asked questions that seemed innocent at the time. How often I talked to Daniel, whether we had fought, whether I was scared about the baby. I answered her honestly because she was my sister, and I didn't yet understand what she was capable of. The night of the storm, I was in my room trying to study, trying to pretend my life was still normal, when my father called me downstairs. His voice was harder than I had ever heard it. When I walked into the living room, Claire was sitting next to my mother, her face streaked with tears, her sleeve pulled up to reveal a bruise on her arm. My father was holding Claire's phone. On the screen were screenshots of text messages that appeared to have come from me. They were vicious. They threatened Claire. They called her names I had never called anyone. They promised to hurt her, to destroy her, to make her life miserable. And they referenced the pregnancy as proof that I was out of control, that I was dangerous, that I could not be trusted. Claire had watched me unlock my phone often enough to learn the code. Later, I understood that she had used it while I was out of the room to send threatening messages to one of her own accounts. She deleted them from my phone, then showed our father screenshots from hers. I had not written any of them. I said so. I said it over and over. I told them to look at the timestamps, to check my phone, to compare the language to anything I had ever actually written. I told them Claire was lying, that she had fabricated the messages, that the bruise on her arm was from something else or self-inflicted. She had accused me of hurting her before. I recognized the pattern, even if my parents refused to see it. I begged them to believe me. They didn't. They didn't even check. "You're a danger to this family," my father said. "You're a danger to your sister. We can't have you in this house." I reminded him that I was 15. I reminded him that I was pregnant. I reminded him that there was a storm outside, that I had nowhere to go, that it was the middle of the night. I used every rational argument I could think of, because I had been raised to be rational, to solve problems, to be the mature one. He didn't care. Or rather, he cared more about protecting Claire from the threat he believed I posed than about protecting me from the danger he was putting me in. The pregnancy, in his mind, had already marked me as lost. The messages confirmed what he wanted to believe, that I was not just pregnant, but fundamentally corrupted, a danger to the good daughter, the one who still mattered. My mother said nothing. She sat on the couch with her arm around Claire, who was still crying, and she said nothing at all. In some ways, her silence was worse than my father's anger. At least he believed he was protecting someone. She just let it happen. He walked me to the front door. He opened it. The rain was coming down in sheets, the wind whipping the trees into wild shapes against the dark sky. Thunder rumbled in the distance. I stood on the porch under the small overhang, still not quite believing what was happening, still waiting for someone to come to their senses and call me back inside. "You made this choice," my father said. "Now you have to live with it." He closed the door. I heard the lock click into place. I stood there for a long time, Minutes, maybe longer. I kept thinking that someone would open the door, my mother maybe, coming to her senses and realizing you couldn't put a pregnant 15-year-old out into a storm. Or Claire, dropping the act now that she had gotten what she wanted. Or even my father, recognizing that whatever he thought I had done, this was not the answer. No one came. Through the living room window, I could see them inside. My father was standing with his back to the door. My mother was still on the couch, and Claire had stopped crying. She was looking toward the window, toward where I was standing in the rain, and her expression was not one of triumph or satisfaction. It was simply blank, as if I were already gone. I turned away from the window. I started walking. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay on that porch forever, waiting for a door that wasn't going to open. I thought maybe I could get to the main road, find a bus stop, find somewhere with lights and people and shelter. The rain was so heavy I could barely see. The road was dark. I don't remember hearing the car. I don't remember seeing the headlights. I just remember the impact. And then nothing. And then waking up in an ambulance with a stranger holding my hand and telling me I was going to be okay. The stranger was Dr. Eleanor Vance, a professor at the State University who had been driving home from a late lecture. She had been coming around a curve when I stepped into the road. She had swerved, but not enough. The collision had thrown me into a ditch. She had called 911, stayed with me until the ambulance arrived, and then followed it to the hospital. Because, as she told me later, she couldn't bear the thought of a child being alone in an emergency room. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed that I had a concussion, 3 cracked ribs, and extensive bruising. Miraculously, the baby was fine. They kept me for observation, and Eleanor stayed in the waiting room the entire time. She was the one who asked the questions that no one else was asking. Why was a pregnant 15-year-old out alone in a storm? Where were her parents? Why had no one come looking for her? My parents did come, eventually. The hospital had called them. They arrived looking harried and defensive, and they immediately began explaining to anyone who would listen that I had run away, that I had been troubled for months, that they had been doing their best with a difficult child. They called it a family matter. They called it discipline. Eleanor was the one who looked at them and asked, "You put your pregnant daughter out of your house during a severe thunderstorm, and you're calling that discipline?" Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. She was not a social worker. She was not a lawyer. She was simply an adult who saw something wrong and refused to look away. After she spoke, the hospital called someone. A social worker arrived. Questions were asked that my parents could not answer without revealing the truth, that they had thrown their 15-year-old daughter out of their home and locked the door behind her. The days that followed were a blur of social workers and temporary placements and legal consultations. I didn't go home. I couldn't go home. The state was involved now. I was placed in emergency foster care while the situation was assessed. I kept waiting for my parents to call, to apologize, to tell me they had realized their mistake and wanted me back. I kept waiting for Claire to admit what she had done. Instead, a week after I was discharged from the hospital, I received a letter from my parents' attorney. It was a formal statement, notarized and legally precise. It said that my parents were ending any personal relationship with me. They would provide nothing beyond what the law required. They would not be involved in my pregnancy or the raising of my child. They did not consider me or my future child to be part of their family. The statement was not an admission of anything. It was a written declaration that they wanted nothing more to do with me, formalized so that there could be no ambiguity. I read the document in the office of my caseworker, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Patterson, who had seen too many cases like mine to be shocked by any of them. When I finished reading, I set it down on her desk and sat very still, waiting for the tears to come. They didn't. What I felt instead was something colder and quieter. It was the understanding that my parents were not going to realize their mistake. They were not going to come for me. They had chosen Claire's story over my truth, and they were going to keep choosing it forever, because admitting otherwise would mean admitting what they had done. "What happens now?" I asked Mrs. Patterson. "Now we figure out how to build something new," she said. I spent the following weeks healing slowly, sleeping upright because of my ribs, and returning for repeated checks on the baby. The court ultimately kept me in state care after my parents made clear that they would not take me back. And that was what we did. The state placed me in a long-term foster situation with a family that specialized in pregnant teens. Eleanor, who had no legal standing but a great deal of determination, received Mrs. Patterson's approval to visit me and became a regular presence. She brought books, helped me keep up with my schoolwork, sat with me during the hardest days of my pregnancy. She didn't try to replace my mother. She simply became what my mother had never been, a steady, reliable presence who asked nothing in return. When Maya was born, Eleanor was in the waiting room. When I graduated from high school a year later, Eleanor was in the audience. When I applied to college and then to graduate school, and then for the job I have now, Eleanor was the reference I listed. She is, in every way that matters, the mother I chose. Daniel tried to stay involved at first. His parents moved him out of state after the scandal, and for a while we wrote and spoke whenever we could. But we were 15, separated by adults and circumstances neither of us controlled, and the promise he had made before the storm did not survive the life that followed. He was never erased from Maya's history, but he did not become part of the family Eleanor and I built around her. I told Maya the truth about her grandparents when she was old enough to understand. I told her about Claire, about the lies, about the document. I told her that none of it was her fault, that none of it reflected on her worth, that she was the most loved child I could imagine. And I told her that if she ever wanted to meet her biological grandparents, I would not stop her. But I would want her to be prepared for the possibility that they would disappoint her. She had never asked to meet them. Until the week of the anniversary party, I thought she never would. After my parents left my office, I went home and sat at my kitchen table for a long time, the way I used to sit when I was 15 and trying to understand things that didn't make sense. I thought about my mother's outstretched hand. I thought about my father's talk of narratives. I thought about the word they kept using, grandson. They had invented a child. For 20 years, while I was raising my daughter alone, they had invented a grandson. They had turned one unsupported assumption into a story they repeated for years. He was the version of my child they could love, male, imaginary, and completely under their control. And now, they needed me to bring him to their party. They needed me to stand up in front of their friends and colleagues and confirm that the lie they had been telling for 2 decades was the truth. They wanted me to erase my own daughter, or at least to disguise her, to present her as something she wasn't, to protect a story that had never been true. I thought about what it would cost me to refuse. My parents would be humiliated. Their friends would realize they had been lied to. The perfect family image they had maintained for 40 years would crack, maybe irreparably. People would ask questions. They would dig into the story. They would find out about the document, about the storm, about the hospital. The truth would come out. I thought about what it would cost me to agree. My parents would get what they wanted. They would introduce their reunited daughter and their grandson. They would be gracious and tearful and everything everyone expected. And I would go back to my life knowing that I had let them do it again. Let them use me to maintain their reputation. Let them erase my daughter the way they had once erased me. Neither choice felt right. Neither choice felt like mine. But as I sat there, I understood that refusing would not stop their story. They would explain my absence for me. They would say I had changed my mind, that I was still angry, that I had denied them the reunion they had tried so generously to arrange. The invented grandson would remain exactly where they had placed him, and Maya would remain invisible. That was when the choice finally became mine. I would go. I would not play along, and I would not let them introduce a person who had never existed. I would walk into the room with the daughter they had refused to know, and I would tell the truth in the same place where they had planned to perform the lie. I called Eleanor. She listened without interrupting, the way she always does. And when I finished, she was quiet for a moment before she spoke. "What does Maya think?" she asked. I haven't told her yet. I wanted to figure out what I thought first. "You should tell her. She's not a child anymore. She deserves to make her own decision about this." I knew Eleanor was right, but I was afraid. I was afraid that Maya would want to meet her grandparents, the grandparents who had never wanted to meet her, who didn't even know her name. I was afraid that the rejection I had spent 19 years protecting her from would finally reach her, and I wouldn't be able to stop it. That evening, I called Maya and told her everything. I told her about the visit, about the invitation, about the lie of the grandson. I told her what my parents wanted and what they expected us to do. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "They made up a whole person," she said finally. "They made up a grandson because it was easier than admitting they had a granddaughter they threw away." "Yes. And now they want you to show up and pretend it was all a misunderstanding. They don't want to know me. They want to fit me into the story they already told." "Yes." Another long pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, steady and thoughtful. Maya has always been thoughtful. She thinks before she speaks, considers before she acts. She is the opposite of the impulsive, emotional teenager I was supposed to have been. "So you've decided to go," she said. "Yes." Not to play along, to tell the truth, to show them who you really are and who I really am, to let them see what they threw away. If they want a reunion, give them one, just not the one they're expecting. "Maya, you don't have to be part of this. This is my history, my family." "I'm your family," she said. "And this is my history too. They're my grandparents, whether they want to be or not. I'm not going to let you face them alone." I felt tears prick at my eyes. "I don't want you to get hurt." "Mom, I'm 19 years old. I'm not a child they can damage anymore. I know who I am. I know who you are. If they can't see that, it's their loss, not mine." I thought about the document, still tucked away in my filing cabinet after all these years. I thought about Eleanor, who had been more of a parent to me than either of my biological parents had ever been. I thought about Maya, standing steady and sure on the other end of the phone, offering to walk into a room full of strangers and face down the people who had tried to erase her before she was born. "I'm going," I said. "But if you come with me, we go on our terms. We tell the truth, and we bring Eleanor. As backup? As a witness." She was there at the hospital. She saw what happened. If they try to twist the story, she'll be there to set it straight. "What about the document?" "I'll bring that too. The original. The one with their signatures." Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "They're going to regret ever asking you to come." "I don't want them to regret it," I said. "I just want them to finally understand what they did." 2 days before the party, my parents tried a different approach. My father had left a message through the university office after their visit, and I had returned it from my personal phone. 2 days before the party, he called that number directly. His voice was strained in a way I hadn't heard before. "We need to talk about the logistics of the party," he said. "We need to know how to introduce you." "I'm not going to pretend to have a son if that's what you're asking." "We understand that. We've discussed it. We're willing to adapt." I waited. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, the kind of heavy breathing that meant he was preparing to say something he knew I wouldn't like. "Here's what we're proposing," he said. "You come to the party. You bring the girl, your daughter. We'll introduce you, and we'll say your son was unable to attend. Your daughter can be there with you, but we don't identify her as our granddaughter that evening. After the party, we can explain that there was confusion over the years. We can get to know her. We can work out the rest privately. It's not too late." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You want me to bring my daughter to your party, but not introduce her as your granddaughter? You want to pretend she's something else?" "We're not pretending anything. We're just managing the narrative. People are expecting a grandson. If we suddenly identify the young woman with you as our granddaughter, there will be questions, awkward questions. If we can just get through the evening, we can explain everything later. We can tell people there was a misunderstanding, that we lost touch, that we made mistakes. But if we try to explain everything at the party, it will be chaos. It will ruin the celebration. You want me to hide my daughter so you don't have to feel awkward. That's not what I'm saying. It's exactly what you're saying. You want me to bring Maya, my daughter, your granddaughter, to your party and not call her what she is. You want me to let you introduce her as a family friend or a distant relative or whatever else you can think of that doesn't contradict the story you've been telling. Temporarily, just for the evening." I thought about Maya at age 7, asking if she had done something wrong. I thought about Maya at age 12, writing an essay about her family for a school project and having to explain why her grandparents weren't in her life. I thought about Maya at age 19, standing tall and saying she would face these people with me, expecting nothing from them except the truth. "No," I said. "I'm not hiding her. I'm not pretending she's anything other than what she is. She is your granddaughter, the only one you have. If you want me at your party, you will get both of us, and everyone will know exactly who she is." My father was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was harder. "You're being unreasonable. We're trying to meet you halfway. We're trying to make things right." "You're not trying to make things right. You're trying to protect your reputation. You found out you had a granddaughter instead of a grandson, and your first thought was how to hide her. That's not making things right. That's the same thing you did 20 years ago, trying to erase a child who didn't fit your story. That's not fair." "No," I said, "it isn't. None of this has been fair. But I'm done letting you decide what story gets told. I'm coming to your party. I'm bringing my daughter, and I'm telling the truth. If you don't want that, you can uninvite me. But we both know you won't do that. Because if I don't show up, everyone will ask why. And you'll have to explain that, too." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something else. Something that felt almost like relief. I had spent 20 years being the girl who disappeared, the story that got rewritten, the person whose existence was inconvenient. I was done being convenient. They had heard my warning and treated it as another boundary they could pressure me into abandoning. They still believed that once I stood in front of them, surrounded by their friends and their version of the family, I would fall back into the role they had assigned me. That night, I told Maya about the conversation. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, So they want me to be the dirty secret again, just like before I was born. Yes. And what did you tell them? I told them no. I told them if we come as we are. Mother and daughter. Their daughter and their granddaughter. No hiding, no pretending, no stories about misunderstandings. She smiled. A small, fierce smile that reminded me of Eleanor in a way I couldn't quite explain. Good. Then I'm coming. And I'm wearing the red dress. The red dress was one she had bought for a college formal, a striking crimson that made her look like someone who could not be ignored. I had told her once that it was a dress for being seen. She had remembered. Are you nervous? I asked. Terrified, she said, but also kind of excited. Is that weird? No, I feel the same way. It's like I've spent my whole life knowing about these people, knowing what they did to you, knowing they didn't want me. And now I get to stand in front of them and say, I'm here anyway. You didn't stop me from existing. You didn't stop me from becoming who I am. That feels powerful. I thought about the 15-year-old girl I had been, standing in the rain with nowhere to go. She had not felt powerful. She had felt small and alone and terrified. But she had survived. She had built a life. She had raised a daughter who could stand in a red dress and feel powerful. I'm proud of you, I said. You know that, right? I know. I'm proud of you too. The day before the party, I received a phone call from my sister. I hadn't spoken to Claire in 20 years, but I recognized her voice immediately. It was higher than I remembered, more careful, as if she were choosing each word with the precision of someone navigating a minefield. I know Mom and Dad came to see you, she said. I know about the party. What do you want, Claire? I want to talk, just the two of us, not about the party, not about the past, just, I want to see you. I should have said no. I should have hung up the phone and not looked back. But some part of me, the part that still remembered being 12 years old and watching my baby sister take her first steps, wanted to believe that she had changed. So I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near my office, in a neutral space where neither of us would have the advantage. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea untouched in front of her. She looked older, of course, we both did, but there was something else different about her. The sharp, calculating quality I remembered from our childhood seemed to have softened. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had been carrying a weight for a very long time. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either. What do you want to talk about? She wrapped her hands around her cup, even though the tea must have been cold by then. I want to talk about what happened. I want to explain. You let them believe I threatened you. You watched Dad put me out and you said nothing. What is there to explain? She flinched. I was 12 years old. I was scared and stupid, and I didn't understand what the consequences would be. I knew things were getting out of control, and I did nothing. I thought they would punish you, maybe ground you or send you away for a few weeks. I didn't think Dad would actually put you out. But he did. And when you saw what happened, when you understood the consequences, you still didn't tell them they were wrong? You let them keep believing a version of events that made me seem like the danger. For 20 years. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I know. And I've lived with that every day. I've told myself every story I could think of to make it bearable. I was a child. I was scared. I didn't know how to stop what had already started. But none of that changes what happened. Why are you telling me this now? She looked up at me, and her eyes were bright with tears. Because Mom and Dad want to involve you again. They want you to come to that party and pretend everything is fine. They want you to bring your daughter, and they want to present her in a way that fits their story. And I can't let them do that without speaking to you first. You're warning me? You're the one who helped create this situation. I know, and I'm more sorry than you will ever know. But I'm also trying to do what I can, in whatever way is still possible. I looked at her for a long moment. The apology was real, or at least it seemed real. But there was something missing from it. She had come close to naming the lie, but she still hadn't offered to tell the truth. She hadn't offered to stand up in front of our parents and our parents' friends and say what had really happened. She was warning me, but she was still protecting herself. Were the messages real, Claire? Her fingers tightened around the cup. Was the bruise real? She looked down. Are you going to tell Mom and Dad the truth? I asked. The pause that followed was the only answer I needed. Claire, you've been carrying this for 20 years. You've been letting them believe a lie about me, about what kind of person I am. Now they're building another lie on top of it, and you're asking me to walk away so you don't have to face what you did. It's not that simple. It is that simple. Either you tell the truth or you don't. Either you stand with me or you stand with them. Those are the only options. She didn't answer. She looked down at her cold tea, and her silence told me everything I needed to know. She was sorry, but not sorry enough. She wanted to make things right, but not if it cost her the comfortable life she had built. As the good daughter, the one who stayed, the one who didn't cause problems. I stood up. Thank you for the warning, but I'm going to the party, and I'm going to tell the truth. What you decide to do is up to you. I left her sitting there, and I didn't look back. But as I walked to my car, I felt the weight of a new understanding settling over me. Claire might tell the truth, or she might not. She might finally do the right thing, or she might choose self-preservation again. I couldn't control her choice. I could only control my own. For the first time in 20 years, I was choosing to be seen. The night of the party, I picked up Eleanor from her apartment. She was wearing a dark blue suit, simple and elegant, the kind of outfit that gave her an air of quiet authority. She had been a professor for 30 years. She knew how to command a room without raising her voice. "You're sure about this?" she asked as we drove toward the hotel. "I'm sure. Are you?" "I can tell them what I saw that night and what your parents said at the hospital. Nothing beyond that. That's all I need." The hotel was one of the nicest in the city, the kind of place my parents would choose for an event that was meant to impress. The parking lot was full of expensive cars. Through the lobby windows, I could see people in formal wear making their way toward the ballroom. The whole scene was exactly what my mother would have wanted. Elegant, controlled, respectable. No one stopped us in the lobby. My parents had apparently decided that once I saw the room, the guests, and the celebration already underway, I would lose my nerve. Maya was already there, waiting for us near the entrance. She was wearing the red dress, and she looked beautiful and fierce and absolutely unafraid. When she saw us, she walked over and took my hand. "Ready?" she asked. I looked at her. I looked at Eleanor. I thought about the folder in my bag, the one I had carried for 20 years. I thought about the 15-year-old girl who had stood at another door 20 years ago, waiting for it to open. "Ready," I said. We walked down the hotel corridor together and stopped outside the closed ballroom doors. And then I was back at the ballroom doors, hearing my father make the announcement I had known was coming. Through the closed ballroom doors, my father's voice carried clearly enough that I could picture him on the stage. He thanked the guests for celebrating 40 years of marriage, then began talking about family, about bonds that survived distance, about a daughter who had chosen another path, and parents who had never stopped waiting. "And tonight," he said, his voice filling with practiced emotion, "that hope has finally been realized. After 20 years, our daughter Catherine has returned to us, and she's brought with her our grandson, whom we have waited so long to meet. This is a moment of healing, a moment of reunion. Please join us in welcoming them." Applause rose behind the doors. I opened my bag, made sure the folder was still there, and reached for the handle. Maya straightened beside me. Eleanor gave a single nod. I pushed the door open. The ballroom was exactly as I had imagined it. Round tables covered in white linen, centerpieces of pale roses, a dance floor at the center, a small stage at the front. On a large screen behind my parents, a slideshow was playing. Their wedding, their early career successes, family vacations, Claire at various ages, always smiling, always the center of the frame. Our grandparents, now long past, aunts, uncles, cousins, the entire history of a family, curated and polished for display. I was in none of the photographs. Maya, of course, was in none of them either. We had been erased so thoroughly that if you didn't know better, you would think my parents had only one daughter, only one child. Claire was everywhere in those images, the beloved daughter, the only one who mattered. The slideshow was proof of what I had always known. In the story my parents told about themselves, I had never existed at all. The room was full of people I didn't recognize, colleagues of my father's from his years in corporate law, friends of my mother's from her various charitable committees, extended family members who had probably been told I was estranged by choice, difficult, unreachable. They were all dressed in their finest, holding glasses of champagne, turned now toward the doors, with the easy confidence of people who believed they already knew the story they were about to witness. My mother stood beside my father in a gold dress that caught the light, her hair arranged in an elaborate updo that must have taken hours. She looked like a woman who had everything under control, who had never made a mistake in her life, who had certainly never thrown her pregnant daughter out into a storm. The applause faltered as we entered. People had turned toward the doors, expecting a woman and a young man. Instead, they saw me, beside a 19-year-old woman in a red dress, with Eleanor walking a few steps behind us. My father's smile faltered when he saw us clearly. Then he saw Eleanor. His hand tightened around the microphone, and for the first time that evening, his practiced expression disappeared completely. He came down from the stage without switching the microphone off and stopped several feet behind my mother as she hurried toward us. My mother recovered first. She stepped down from the stage and came toward us with the smooth urgency of someone trying to contain a spill before it reached the carpet. "Catherine," she said quietly, "come with me for a moment. We need to straighten this out before you're introduced." "You already introduced us." Her eyes moved to Maya and then to Eleanor. "This is not the place." "It's the place you chose." The guests nearest us had stopped applauding. People farther back were beginning to lean sideways to see what had delayed the entrance. My mother kept her smile in place, but her hand closed around my forearm. "Please," she said, "don't do this here." I removed her hand. "I'm not the one who announced a grandson who doesn't exist." The microphone was still live in my father's hand behind her. My last sentence carried farther than my mother expected, and the room quieted by degrees. My father reached for the switch, but by then the nearest tables had heard me, and the silence spreading through the ballroom no longer needed amplification. She turned toward the guests before I could say anything else. "There has been a small misunderstanding," she said, raising her voice. "Catherine has brought a young friend with her. Our grandson was unfortunately unable to attend, but the important thing is that our daughter is finally home." Maya looked at me. I felt her hand close around mine. "My son?" I said. My father had lowered the microphone, but the room had become quiet enough that I no longer needed it. "I don't have a son. I never did. This is my daughter, Maya, your granddaughter, the one you've never met, the one you never asked about." The murmuring in the room grew louder. My mother's face went pale. My father opened his mouth and closed it again. "You told everyone I had a son," I continued, my voice steady. "You told them I chose to stay away. You told them you were waiting for me to come back. But none of that is true. Do you want to tell them what really happened? Or should I?" My mother took the microphone from him. "Catherine, this isn't the time or place. Let's discuss this privately, as a family." "We're not a family." "You made sure of that 20 years ago." I opened my bag, took out the folder, and removed the statement. The paper was yellowed with age, but the notary seal was still visible, and the signatures at the bottom were unmistakably theirs. I held it up so the people at the nearest tables could see the notary seal and their signatures. "This is the statement you had your lawyer send me a week after you threw me out of your house. I was 15 years old. I was pregnant. It was the middle of the night in a thunderstorm. You put me out on the street and locked the door. And when I ended up in the hospital, after being hit by a car, you told the doctors it was a family matter. You told them I was troubled. You told them I had run away." "That's not," my father started. "This says that you were ending any personal relationship with me, that you would provide nothing beyond what the law required, that you would not be involved in my pregnancy or the raising of my child, that you did not consider my child, this child, right here, to be part of your family. You signed it. You had it notarized. You made your choice impossible to misunderstand." The room had gone very quiet. I could see people exchanging glances, some of them looking uncomfortable, others staring at my parents with expressions that had changed completely. "You didn't come looking for me because you wanted a reunion," I said. "You came looking for me because you had told everyone I had a son, and you needed a grandson to show at your party. When you found out I had a daughter instead, you did not ask a single question about her. Then you asked me to bring her and hide who she was. You wanted to tell everyone the grandson couldn't attend, while your real granddaughter stood in the room as someone who had merely come with me." My mother's composure finally cracked. "We made mistakes," she said, her voice rising. "We know we made mistakes, but we were trying to protect our family. We had another daughter to think about." Claire was only 12 years old, and there were accusations made. Serious accusations. Messages that seemed to come from Catherine. We had to make a choice. My father took it back. "We believed our younger daughter needed protection. You may judge the decision harshly, but we did not act without what we believed was a reason at the time." For a moment, the balance shifted. The document proved that they had rejected me. It did not prove why. Around the room, I saw the uncertainty return to some faces. My parents had found the one defense they had carried for 20 years. They had believed they were protecting one child from another. Eleanor stepped forward. "I cannot tell you what happened inside that house," she said. Her voice was calm, the same voice she had used in the hospital. "I was not there. What I can tell you is that I found a 15-year-old pregnant girl injured beside a road during a severe storm. I called the ambulance. I stayed at the hospital. When her parents arrived, they acknowledged that they had put her out and locked the door. They called it discipline. They did not ask how long she had been alone. They did not ask whether she had been looking for shelter. They defended the decision. My father stared at her. He remembered her now. I could see it in the way his shoulders had tightened. "We believed we were protecting Claire," my mother repeated. Then she looked past me, toward the back of the room. "Claire, tell them. Tell them what Catherine was like then. Tell them why we were afraid." Everyone turned. Claire was standing beside a table near the back wall, close to the entrance. I had not seen her when we came in. She looked like she had been crying, and her hands were shaking. My mother held out one hand toward her, as if calling the loyal daughter back into place. For several seconds, Claire said nothing. My parents still had a way out. If she confirmed their story, the room would divide. The statement would remain cruel, the hospital night indefensible. But the central accusation against me would survive. Claire could protect the life she had built by saying one sentence. I looked at her, but I did not ask. I had already made my choice before I entered the room. Whatever she did now, I would not take back the truth I had spoken. Claire stepped forward. "She's telling the truth." My mother's hand dropped. "I lied," Claire said. "I faked the messages. I gave myself the bruise. I was 12 years old and jealous, and I thought they would punish her. After Dad put her out, after the accident, I was too scared to admit what I had done. Then I kept being scared. I let them believe it for 20 years. My mother made a sound I had never heard before, a kind of strangled gasp. "Claire, what are you saying? You can't possibly—" "I can," Claire said. "I did. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry to Catherine, and I'm sorry to Maya. I'm sorry for everything." I looked at her, but there was nothing I could give her in that room. The truth mattered. It did not restore what the silence after it had taken. The room erupted. People were talking all at once, some of them shocked, some angry, others simply turning away from my parents as if proximity itself had become uncomfortable. My mother clung to my father's arm. My father stared at Claire as if he had never seen her before. And I felt something shift inside me. Not relief exactly, not triumph. Something quieter. Something that felt like the closing of a door I had been holding open for 20 years. "This isn't a reunion," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "This isn't a healing. This is the truth. You threw me away. You threw my daughter away. You built a lie to cover it up, and then you built another lie on top of that one. And now you want me to help you keep it going. I won't. I'm done protecting your reputation. I'm done being invisible. My name is Catherine. This is my daughter, Maya. She is your granddaughter, whether you acknowledge her or not. And you don't get to use us anymore." My father tried to speak, but no words came out. My mother was crying now, real tears, not the practiced ones she had prepared for the reunion. I didn't know if she was crying for me or for herself. It didn't matter. "From this point forward, you will not use my name. You will not use my daughter's name. You will correct the lies you told about us. You will not contact Maya unless she chooses to hear from you. Publicly calling us family does not give you access to us. The door you closed 20 years ago stays closed." Maya stepped closer to me. "I came here as my mother's daughter," she said. "Not as a grandchild you can claim when it suits you." I returned the statement to the folder, placed the folder back in my bag, and took Maya's hand. Eleanor moved to my other side. "Enjoy the rest of your party," I said. I hope it was worth it. We walked out of the ballroom together, Maya and I and Eleanor. Behind us, the noise was rising, voices layered on top of voices, the sound of a perfect facade crumbling into dust. I didn't look back. I had spent too many years looking back. It was time to face forward. In the days that followed, I learned what it felt like to no longer be a secret. The story moved quickly through my parents' social circle, carried by the people who had been in the ballroom and heard Claire correct the history my parents had told them. People who had known my parents for years called to express shock, sympathy, outrage on my behalf. I didn't take the calls. Their validation was not what I was looking for. What mattered was that the lie was broken. The grandson who had never existed was finally laid to rest. The daughter who had been erased was finally named. My parents could no longer pretend that their version of our family was the truth. They had to live with what they had done, in full view of everyone who had ever believed in their perfection. Whether they corrected the story willingly no longer mattered. Everyone in that room had heard Claire correct it for them. A week after the party, I received a letter from Claire. It was long, pages and pages of cramped handwriting that spilled over the margins, as if she had been writing in a rush, afraid she would lose her nerve if she slowed down. She wrote about her jealousy, her fear, her shame. She wrote about the moment she realized what had happened to me after the storm, the moment she understood that her lie had nearly killed me. She wrote about the 20 years she had spent trying to convince herself it wasn't her fault, that she had been a child, that she hadn't known what she was doing. And she wrote about the night of the party, the moment she had finally understood that the only way out was through the truth. She asked for forgiveness. She said she didn't expect it. She said she would understand if I never wanted to speak to her again. I read the letter 3 times. Then I sat down and wrote a reply. I believe that you were a child when you told the first lie. I believe that you were scared and confused and that you didn't fully understand the consequences. But you were not a child for the next 20 years. You were an adult who knew the truth and chose to stay silent. That silence was its own kind of lie. It allowed our parents to continue believing they had done the right thing. It allowed them to erase me and my daughter from their story. It allowed the wound to fester for 2 decades. I don't hate you. I don't wish you harm. But I can't give you the relationship you want. The trust that was broken can't be rebuilt with a letter, no matter how honest. Maybe someday that will change, but not yet. I hope you find a way to live with what happened. I hope you find a way to be better, but that journey is yours to take. I can't walk it with you. I signed my name and mailed the letter. Then I closed that chapter and moved on. It's been several months now since the anniversary party. Life has settled back into its familiar rhythms. I go to work, I help my students, I come home to my quiet house, where photographs of my real family hang on the walls. Maya as a baby, her face scrunched up and furious at the indignity of being born. Maya at 5, grinning with a gap-toothed smile on her first day of kindergarten. Maya at 15, dressed for her first school dance, looking so grown up I could hardly breathe. The 2 of us at her high school graduation, her cap slightly askew, my arm around her shoulders. Eleanor at every milestone, steady and constant, the grandmother Maya deserved. These photographs aren't perfect. They aren't curated or polished or designed to impress. They're just true. They show a family that was built from scratch, from love and stubbornness and the refusal to disappear. Tonight we're having dinner together. Maya home from college for the weekend, Eleanor in her usual chair at my kitchen table. The 3 of us eating pasta from mismatched plates because I never did develop my mother's talent for entertaining. I got an A on my biology paper, Maya says. The one about genetic inheritance patterns. That's wonderful, Eleanor says. Did you use yourself as a case study? Stubbornness as a dominant trait? Maya laughs. It's not in the textbook, but it should be. I look at them, my daughter, my chosen mother, and I feel something settle in my chest. It's not happiness exactly, though happiness is part of it. It's something deeper. It's the knowledge that I am exactly where I am supposed to be, with exactly the people I am supposed to be with. A family is not a story you tell to impress other people. It's not a slideshow of carefully selected photographs or a narrative you construct to hide the ugly parts. A family is the people who stay, the people who show up, the people who hold your hand in the ambulance and sit in the waiting room and never, ever ask you to be invisible so they can be comfortable. The vase is broken. It always was. And I am no longer afraid of the pieces.